Tonight, the PNG government says it's resolved an asylum seeker standoff on Manus Island, but protests at the centre continue. Tony Abbott returns to work as details emerge about dissent in the cabinet over Medicare. Time is running out for the ringleaders of the Bali Nine, with the government continuing to urge Indonesia to grant clemency.
And coming up on the drum, Triple J turns 40. We'll celebrate the milestone with former presenter Angela Catterns.
Good evening, Rachel Pupazzoni with ABC News. There are conflicting reports tonight out of Manus Island about whether a protest there has been resolved or not, and if so, to what extent. The PNG government says a senior official negotiated an end to a week-long protest involving barricades and hunger strikes at one compound. But other asylum seekers on Manus Island say they saw people being beaten and handcuffed. Our PNG correspondent Liam Cochrane has this update.
The blockade of Delta compound has ended, that much is clear. There are conflicting reports over how that exactly came about. The PNG government is saying that the country's chief migration officer entered Delta compound, spoke with the leaders of the protest, and they negotiated an end to the demonstration. This was done peacefully, there was no confrontation, there were no injuries, according to the Papua New Guinean government. Asylum seekers and their advocates in Australia are giving a different version of events. They're saying that there was a confrontation, that people were arrested, they were beaten, they were dragged on the ground and handcuffed. There is no evidence to that, there's no photographs or images, and it should be noted that some of the accounts are coming from asylum seekers in different compounds who would not have had a direct line of sight to that particular incident. So the PNG government version of events is the official version of events, which is that it was resolved peacefully and without injury. There are no independent observers on the island. The information comes from the various sources, and we do our best to put it together and very conservatively put together the facts as we can stand them up. There is no doubt, though, that this particular this flashpoint, as you referred to it, has ended. It is important to note that this doesn't mean the end for the protests, the wider protests at the centre. Delta compound is just one of several within the facility, but protests are continuing at Oscar compound, Mike and Foxtrot. They were lower key protests. There were men chanting, hanging up banners with slogans, and in some cases there were incidents of self-harm. But those protests are going on. The main development this afternoon has been that this real flashpoint at Delta, which there were serious concerns that it could turn into the sort of violence we saw last February, that has been resolved.
The ABC has confirmed reports the Prime Minister pushed for cuts to GP rebates against the advice of the Treasurer and Health Minister. With those plans now shelved, backbenchers and Cabinet Ministers are questioning Tony Abbott's judgment. Here's political editor Chris Uhlmann.
A brief break is over and a long year looms for the Prime Minister.
And I can think of no better way to begin the 2015 working year than to be at this event.
Tony Abbott was asking, not answering questions on his first day back at work.
So what's the first step on this road?
But his ministers were all being grilled about reports of a cabinet spat over the government's plans for Medicare.
Well, I'm not going to respond to those sort of suggestions that are scuttlebutt in the press.
As reported, did you oppose as crazy the $20 cut to GP rebates?
I'm not going to engage in discussion on gossip.
It's a report in the paper by other people.
Well, so the Daily Telegraph is...
But the ABC has confirmed a News Limited report that the Prime Minister insisted on a dramatic cut to GP payments for short consultations in the face of stiff opposition from the Treasurer Joe Hockey and the then Health Minister Peter Dutton. Then, without warning, Tony Abbott abandoned the plan and left the new Health Minister to sweep up.
The changes to level A and B, scheduled to begin on Monday, are off the table.
Susan Lee will now consult with doctors over what Plan C might look like.
Over the past 12 months, we really haven't had any health policy. Also we've had is a discussion about the amount that people pay when they go to the doctors.
Some of Tony Abbott's colleagues are determined that he should wear the blame for the long, untidy retreat from a co-payment, and they now believe there's little chance of a price signal being embedded in Medicare. So the government has wasted precious time and enormous political capital on nothing. Chris Ullman, ABC News, Canberra.
Indonesia is still taking a hard line on the possible execution of Bali 9 leaders Miran Sukumaran and Andrew Chan. 5 other foreign drug offenders have been killed by firing squad, prompting Brazil and the Netherlands to recall their ambassadors. But supporters of the Australian pair are refusing to give up hope of clemency. Indonesia correspondent George Roberts reports.
In the dead of night, on Nusa Kambangan Island off Java, Indonesian firing squads carried out their orders. Indonesia's hailing the executions a success.
The executions of death row inmates in the case of narcotics crimes have been implemented. The executions went well, safely and smoothly.
For Australians Myron Sukumaran and Andrew Chan, both on death row for organising the Bali 9 heroin trafficking attempt, Indonesia's refusal to grant clemency doesn't bode well. The award-winning Australian artist Ben Quilty helped Sukumaran set up art courses in Bali's Kerobokan prison. He was with Sukumaran just after his clemency bid was rejected.
I hadn't considered that my friendship with Myron would end like this. I'd been so astounded by his predicament, and the way he'd rehabilitated himself is very inspiring.
Chan and Sukumaran's lawyer thinks there could be hope.
There's certainly some chance that when all the facts are known, the President may grant us some clemency.
But so far, Australia's attempts to get clemency for the 2 drug smugglers haven't worked.
At this point, the Foreign Minister has rejected my pleas on their behalf, but we will continue to do all we can.
Julie Bishop says Australia's still advocating for the 2 men at every level, but Indonesia's already proven it's willing to ignore the pleas of foreign governments. Brazil and the Netherlands both argued for their citizens to be spared, but they were still shot by firing squads on Sunday morning.
Now those 2 countries have withdrawn their ambassadors from Indonesia.
It is a form of assertiveness of Indonesia's government that we will never be in compromise with the perpetrators, dealers and drug syndicates.
Refusing to make exceptions. George Roberts, ABC News, Jakarta.
A Sydney court has heard the discovery of an apparent Islamic State flag during a recent counter-terrorism raid is irrelevant to the case against a man accused of possessing ammunition. Omar Amouche was today granted bail despite prosecutors arguing his alleged sympathy for the group was of grave concern.
This was Omar Amouche at the time of his arrest at a share house in Greenacre earlier this month. Today he faced court on screen from Silverwater Jail. His lawyer says the decision to release him was never in any doubt.
He was always going to get bail. I just needed a fair run, and I appreciate that the magistrate gave me a fair run.
The court heard police started monitoring Amouche's phone calls last September as part of an investigation into 2 Australians said to have travelled overseas to fight with the terrorist group Islamic State. A flag that's come to symbolise the group, as well as clothing, was allegedly found inside a car during the raids. Amouche's lawyer said it had nothing to do with his client.
The raising of the flag was designed to do one thing, okay, and that is to poison the mind of the magistrate. It's got nothing to do with the case. These are very 2 basic charges.
In the end, the magistrate said the flag wasn't something he could take into account because Amouche isn't actually charged with being involved in the activities of a terrorist organisation. Amouche's friend Mohammed Faitrouni told the court the 50 shotgun shells found by police belonged to him. Mr Faitrouni does hold a gun licence but doesn't currently have a registered firearm. The magistrate said at present the case against Amouche isn't strong. It'll return to court in March. Carl Herr, ABC News.
New forensic technology has led to a breakthrough in Queensland's longest-running child abduction cold case. 14-year-old Marilyn Warman vanished near Canefields on a quiet North Queensland road in 1972. More than 4 decades later, a piece of her skull has been identified.
Marilyn Wallman disappeared 42 years ago while riding to school in Mackay's Northern Beaches. Her bicycle, scattered school books and hat were found by her younger brothers, who left home that day 10 minutes after Marilyn. They weren't close enough to see anything, but they did hear some of her last words.
Just noises in the distance of, things like my leg hurts and just general mumbling in the cane fields.
Hundreds of local police and volunteers searched for any signs of the teenager. Helicopters also joined the search. Nothing was found until about 2 years later, when a skull fragment was uncovered about 40 kilometres away from where Marilyn vanished.
Certainly it is a very important part of the jigsaw.
The bone has been tested a number of times over the years, with nothing conclusive until now.
The partial skull remains that were located in 1974 are in fact of that of Marilyn Wallman.
The Wallman family says it's a step closer to closure, but they'll keep searching to find her killer.
It drives us nuts. That's what we need, is that last piece of evidence, that last little piece of the jigsaw puzzle, as I keep saying, that we need someone to come forward.
In the late 80s, the ABC interviewed the Wallman family. It was considered a cold case back then.
You never get anything to relieve the pain. You never get anything that's going to change it.
One of the main things that we hope is that we find out where she is.
This memorial near where the abduction took place ensures the case is not forgotten. Just last year, a North Mackay backyard was dug up as part of the ongoing investigation. A $250,000 reward is now being offered for any information that leads to an arrest.
There are people out there that will be sitting watching this and may feel it's the right thing to do many years down the track and come forward.
A tiny piece of bone could give a family the answers they need. Jonathan Hare, ABC News, Mackay.
To the Queensland election campaign, and Premier Campbell Newman is promising more resources for police and a continued crackdown on crime if the LNP is re-elected on January the 31st. But he's also fending off criticism from a radio shock jock and a gloomy assessment of the state's economy.
Talking tough in Ipswich. Campbell Newman visited a family home to announce more tablet computers for police, 3 new rapid response hubs and extra resources for intelligence gathering.
The government is committed to fulfil that most important responsibility to protect one's citizens, and that's what we're doing.
These announcements today will ensure that Queensland families and children like Nathaniel and Olivia will certainly be able to sleep in their beds a lot more peaceful.
The Premier says the LNP has already provided extra police officers and reported crime has dropped. He accused Labor of being soft on organised crime, but the controversial anti-bikie laws will be reviewed whichever side wins the election.
The bikie laws have to be reviewed because it's in the law, it's in the legislation. Okay, and when we do that, we'll consult very widely.
The Premier was keen to discuss law and order today, but the economy will also be a key issue in regions like Ipswich. A new report says Queensland is lagging behind the other states in areas like unemployment, housing construction and population growth. The ComSec State of the States report ranks Queensland 5th overall.
Clearly up on where we were in 2012 under Labor, when we were in the bottom ranking of the states. But there is more work to do. We know there have been challenging times. We've seen things such as the fall off in coal and commodity prices.
Campbell Newman has not created jobs. I want to create jobs. Youth unemployment is skyrocketing across this state. And in a couple of weeks' time, people right across Queensland will have an opportunity to send Campbell Newman a message.
Radio presenter Alan Jones had his own message for the Premier, launching the latest in a series of attacks over the airwaves.
Campbell Newman lied to me. I have no reason to believe anything he's promising Queenslanders today.
Look, Alan Jones is a bloke from Sydney who has made all sorts of comments in the past, and there's nothing new about anything that he said.
The LNP campaign is now making its second visit to the Gold Coast. Melinda Howells, ABC News.
Victoria's Premier Daniel Andrews has released the terms of reference for Australia's first Royal Commission into family violence, declaring nothing will be off limits. The broad-ranging inquiry will start work within weeks and victims will be given the chance to tell their stories.
It was a key election promise, and the Royal Commission into Family Violence will start work next month, investigating what's become the leading cause of death and disability for Victorian women under the age of 45.
Nothing is off limits when it comes to repairing a broken system.
The Commission will be armed with broad terms of reference, examining prevention and early intervention measures, as well as victim support and how to better hold perpetrators to account, potentially including tougher sentences.
I'm very keen to look at any recommendations that the Royal Commission comes back with.
It'll also investigate better methods of cooperation between the legal system, police, corrections and child protection agencies. And victims will have the opportunity to tell their own stories.
This is a policy Royal Commission. It's not designed for lawyers at 10 paces to thrash out who's to blame for the situation that we find ourselves in.
The Commission has a budget of $40 million and victims' advocates are keen for long-term solutions.
I'm really pleased to see how much it's engaging different parts of the community for solutions, particularly around monitoring men who are risk to others.
2015 is a critical time for gathering evidence across the country and to enable us as a nation, once and for all, to bring an end to violence against women.
The Premier says he wants the Royal Commission to be a thorough process but not a drawn-out one. He wants its work completed within 12 months so that any recommendations with financial implications can be included in next year's state budget. Frances Bell, ABC News, Melbourne.
The former Australian Test cricketer Stuart MacGill is suing Cricket Australia for more than $2.5 million. He's lodged a claim in the Victorian Supreme Court, arguing he's entitled to 2 years of injury payments, totalling more than $1.6 million. He's also suing for $900,000 in lost interest. Lawyers for the former cricketer claim he suffered a number of injuries while playing, and his career was ended by knee and wrist pain and numbness in his hands. The writ states Cricket Australia pulled out of good faith negotiations over the dispute. As the recovery effort continues at the Adelaide Hills Fireground, authorities are also looking at what lessons can be learned. Research teams are visiting homes to work out why some were left standing while others were destroyed.
More than a fortnight after the bushfire swept through Kersbrook, many are still assessing their losses.
Tried to find some jewellery, but it's all melted, no sign.
While Alex Demchenko's home was one of 27 lost, his neighbour's house just 100 metres away went untouched, despite flames reaching his back porch.
This is the backyard, Black. Just getting mighty sporty now.
Kind of all culminated into one front, and we were sort of surrounded all the way.
Just across the valley, another house was destroyed.
That was 12 hours after the front went through, and it went up just through embers.
Experts are now trying to work out why some houses survived despite the fire burning to their doorsteps, while others succumbed to the heat. 5 teams will examine houses and other damaged structures, with the firefighting response to also be reviewed by New South Wales fire agencies.
There are a number of things that actually contribute to the house burning down, anything from building design, construction materials, property maintenance.
In addition to this, we'll be looking at some of the actions that people took to prepare themselves for bushfire and how they actually responded on the day.
The research will eventually be shared with fire agencies across Australia and New Zealand to help prepare for future bushfires and hopefully save homes.
The more information they can give me, we put the systems in place straight away. I've learnt so much myself from the last couple of weeks and have already started spending money on putting better fire systems in place, clearing more land, building fire units.
Preparing for what they hope will never return. Nicola Gage, ABC News, Adelaide.
Police and SES volunteers have been searching bushland west of Brisbane for a 45-year-old woman who disappeared from an Atkinson Dam caravan park at the weekend. Lisa Lane was last seen on Friday night, but relatives were initially unconcerned and didn't notify police until Saturday afternoon. Ms Lane's mobile phone was left in her home and police say her disappearance is out of character.
Our concern is for her safety and well-being. She's not in any trouble at all, and the most important thing is that we locate Lisa alive and well.
Aerial and ground searches will continue tomorrow. In Victoria, hopes are fading for a fisherman who was swept off rocks near Portland yesterday. The South Australian man fell into rough seas at Cape Bridgewater while fishing with a friend. The Coast Guard, Water Police and divers joined the search today. but couldn't find any trace of the man.
The signs aren't looking good, but obviously we always like to keep an open mind that it's possible that the male may have survived, but obviously as the hours go on it's looking less likely.
Local residents say conditions at the point are very dangerous and the area does have warning signs. Grandmothers in the Northern Territory say they've been left to raise their grandchildren as their ice-addicted children serve time in jail. Methamphetamine is spreading across the Territory and into remote Indigenous communities. In desperation, parents of addicts in Darwin have set up a support group, families crying out for help.
You got people running around with guns and bats and everything else that want to kill each other. I'm just frightened that it's going to be innocent people that are going to get hurt in it.
These grandparents have had their lives turned upside down by methamphetamine.
There's no real help to go anywhere, and this is the first time after coming to this group that we're all able to talk about it.
They've joined the ranks of people caring for their grandchildren while their own children are locked away for meth-related crimes.
I care for my 3 grandsons. My daughter has been incarcerated long-term.
Donna Hunter set up the group Families Crying Out for Help.
All right, I'm not going to be like that guy.
They want ads like these made in Canada that warn people in stark terms of the dangers of the drug. They're also desperate for more rehabilitation options tailored to methamphetamine addiction.
There's nothing out there for them. So if a family member comes up and says, you know, I want help, we don't even know where to send them.
Use of the highly addictive drug, also known as ice, is escalating in the Territory.
Well, we're certainly getting more admissions with people who are psychotic as a result of ice.
Police are making raids every other day.
Our seizures are certainly going up. We're regularly seizing over an ounce at a time.
There are a few hard statistics on methamphetamine use in the Territory. Records just aren't being kept, but many of those the ABC has spoken to say they're worried that use of the drug will continue to climb and that younger people, children, teenagers, are being tempted to try the drug. Ruby Jones, ABC News, Darwin.
The Ukrainian military has reclaimed Donetsk airport from separatist rebels after launching what it described as a massive operation. Drone footage taken by supporters of the Ukrainian military has revealed the scale of destruction at the airport after months of fighting. The airport has been closed for months, but has symbolic value for both sides in the fighting. The West African nation of Mali is now free of Ebola. Mali's government made the declaration after 42 days without a new case of the deadly virus. At least 6 people have died from Ebola in Mali. The World Health Organization estimates the virus has killed more than 8,400 people in neighbouring Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. A new report from the charity Oxfam is warning by next year, the richest 1% of the world's population will own more wealth than the remaining 99%. The Chief Executive Officer of Oxfam Australia, Dr. Helen Zoki, says the research shows a need for urgent action to reduce the income gap.
Globally, we haven't really looked at the issues of what can be done in terms of tax reform, how we can ensure that we can actually deal with the issue of tax haven and profit shifting, and also how we can encourage governments really across the world to take a much more active interest in how we promote inclusive growth. We've heard a lot of growth ahead of the G20 that was held in Brisbane last year, and now as we go into the World Economic Forum. And what Oxfam's concern is that as we see this data, we really need to look at the issue of whether we need a world tax forum, but one that's focusing particularly on inclusive growth so that we can continue the trend of actually lifting people out of poverty across the world.
World number 2 Roger Federer has won his opening match of the Australian Open tonight, beating Taiwan's Enxuan Liu in straight sets. Earlier, Sam Groth became the 5th Australian winner on day 1 of the tournament in Melbourne. He joined Bernard Tomic, Jarmila Gardasova, Mariko Matsevoc and James Duckworth in the second round.
Bernard Tomic had a boisterous home crowd behind him as he fronted Tobias Kamke, but all the early applause came for the German.
Yeah, good shot. Great shot.
Kamke raced to a 5-2 lead before Tomic found his groove. The 22-year-old won 5 straight games to take the opening set. The second set followed the same pattern, except this time the German held on to level the match at a set apiece.
Oh, that's nice.
Sensing the challenge, Tomic responded, winning the third 6-3. He continued his dominance in the fourth set, closing out the match 6-2.
Well, he finishes in style. It took a while, didn't it?
Yamila Gaidasova has seen her fair share of tough first rounds at the Australian Open.
Ah, so good.
But after 9 straight defeats in Melbourne, she'll finally see a second round after beating Romania's Alexandra Dulguru.
Well, there it is.
It was a similar story for Marinko Matasevic.
Tosevic is through.
The 29-year-old ended a 5-year losing streak at the Open by overcoming Russia's Alexandra Kudryavtsev. The local celebrations continued on Court 6, where James Duckworth had a 5-set win over Blaz Kavcic. The shock of the day came in the women's draw, where Anna Ivanovic made a first-round exit. The 5th seed went down to the Czech qualifier Lucy Radecka. The favourites all advanced in the men's draw, Rafael Nadal showing no signs of his recent back injury, with a straight sets win over Mikhail Yuzny. Damien McIver, ABC News.
Australian one-day cricket captain George Bailey has been suspended for Friday's clash against England for a slow over rate in yesterday's 4-wicket win against India. It's been a tough 24 hours off the field for the Australians after David Warner was fined half his match fee for an ugly incident at the MCG.
David Warner is once again in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. During a fiery mid-pitch argument, Warner can be seen telling Indian batsman Rohit Sharma to speak English.
Guess who's involved? David Warner, as he so often is.
This morning, Warner admitted he made the wrong call.
I thought I was okay by asking him to speak English, and I'm going to say it a couple of times if he keeps saying it in Hindi. So I got, slapped in the wrist yesterday by the ICC, and I shouldn't have engaged him, and I should have went to the other side.
David's an aggressive character, and we support that. It's just making sure he does the right things on the ground, and he knows that anyway better than most. So we'll work with him with that.
When asked if Warner crossed the line, Lehmann wasn't as forthcoming.
I don't know what happened out in the field, to be perfectly honest. So the ICC and the umpires are dealing with that, and we'll speak to David and work from there.
But New Zealand cricket great and columnist Martin Crowe has led calls for Warner to be suspended, saying fining serial offenders isn't going to work. You have to take them out of the game for extended periods. Meanwhile, South Africa's AB de Villiers has sounded a warning ahead of the World Cup, smashing the fastest ever one-day international century against the West Indies.
The world record now belongs to AB de Villiers.
The Proteas skipper reached triple figures off just 31 balls. De Villiers finished with 149 off 44 deliveries as his side amassed 2 for 439, winning the match by 148 runs. Daniela Intilli, ABC News.
Let's check the national weather now. Here's Graham Creed.
There's a low-pressure system moving up the Kimberley coast now. It could form into a tropical cyclone overnight. Could potentially become a Category 1 system. Will be worth watching, but it should then weaken as we move into Tuesday evening. Through the east, we've got a very unstable atmosphere, lots of moisture available, so the potential of some locally heavy falls through Queensland and also New South Wales. So let's go state by state, and for Queensland, widespread showers and possible thunderstorms across the northern and most of the eastern districts, pushing through into the eastern parts of the inland, but much of the central west and southwest just hot and dry. For New South Wales, we've also got the potential of widespread showers, even possible thunderstorms through the eastern districts, much more isolated through the inland, although a little bit more likely about the western slopes. We've also got showers becoming widespread across Victoria. They'll start through the western districts, spreading east during the day, possible thunderstorms about the central and eastern districts in the afternoon. We've also got showers about the northwest of Tasmania. They'll spread right across the state as we head into the afternoon as well. In South Australia, only an isolated shower or two, mostly about the coastal districts, but probably a bit more likely about the southeastern area. And for southern Western Australia, relatively clear, dry and hot at this stage, but anywhere further north, some gusty winds around the Pilbara coast, thunderstorms across the north with potential heavy falls, and very hot through the southern parts of the territory.
That is ABC News for now. A reminder, you can keep up to date on all the stories we're following by visiting our website. The address abc.net.au/news. Stay with us for The Drum with Julia Baird. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Thanks for watching, and we'll leave you with pictures celebrating the 40th birthday of Triple J. An exhibition has gone on display in Sydney.